Well, a few technical challenges there, but good morning everybody and welcome, and thank you for joining us for this webinar for food and drink business owners. My name is Andrew Gibb from Old Mill's marketing team, and I'll be your host today. Now, over the last month or so, we've been running a series of webinars covering the challenges of COVID-19 in terms of its impact on the business landscape across the region. Today, we've changed things around a little bit in that we want to focus specifically on the food and drink sector, which is having to address some fundamentally existential issues as we begin to emerge out of lockdown. So who better to help us through or attempt to navigate through these challenging times than Old Mill's Head of Food and Drink, Phil Mills, along with lead advisor and our Chairman of the Board, Jolyon Stonehouse. So welcome back, gentlemen.
Good morning.
Morning, and I'm delighted that you can join us. I think that image that we just seen of you, Phil, with the round of cheese would make a good caption contest. I'm not sure what you were kind of saying, but it looks quite fun. Now, we usually run with a Q&A format, but this morning we're going to try something a little bit different by working our way through a number of critical areas that we hope will resonate with business owners across the whole food and drink supply chain, in what I would usually describe as a bit of a fireside chat between the two of you. Now, I appreciate we haven't been having the kind of weather that lends itself to sitting by a roaring log fire recently, but I think the intention is to really get you both talking through what you're seeing out there in your discussions with both clients and contacts in the sector. I think these kind of sessions work best when the conversation is allowed to flow. That said, we don't want to discourage any questions from our already active audience. So for those of you who are on the live broadcast, you can submit questions via the Q&A in the usual way, and I will endeavour to feed them through to our panellists as we go. And before we jump in, I just need to let you know that this webinar is being recorded and will be uploaded onto our website so that people can watch on demand at a later date. So if everybody's happy, let's crack on. And I'd like to begin with your thoughts, Phil, on how businesses can begin to start trading as hospitality returns as we go into the summer period, as well as what new opportunities might emerge out of all of this.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. And I think this is it's a really interesting challenge, because what we know is that the government have come out and said that there is likely to be some return from the 4th of July. And what we don't know is exactly what that looks like. And lots of businesses are sort of scratching their heads at the moment. I think the fear in the industry, the hospitality industry, is that a limited opening will squeeze what are already tight margins and make trading not only challenging but possibly loss-making. And I guess that's against a backdrop where we know that many of the restaurants out there have got a kind of raring to go and have got customers that would love to be sat with them. So what can you be doing? Well, we've seen already huge innovation in the kind of takeaway space, and we know that a number of restaurants have been able to kind of capitalize on an opportunity that's emerged, and their kind of loyal following has gone forth and supported that. And there's a nice kind of wheeze on VAT, if you like, so that if you're delivering cold takeaway food, you can cut your 20% out. So that's really helped to support a lot of the restaurants trading at the moment. I guess I'm starting to think about whether there is a continuation if we've got a limited opening or a limited fashion in which we can open, where the takeaway option continues to supplement the revenue stream for a restaurant that otherwise can only fill, let's say, 50% of its floor space. And if you're opening up, you've got the kind of fires turned on. Perhaps that's a nice way to help with that kind of margin problem. You're going to have to get innovative. And some restaurants are lucky enough to have some outdoor space. Is it suitable? Could it be adapted to serving people over that critical summer period? I suppose I've had a really interesting conversation with an Australian client, and they're slightly ahead of us in the return to normality and return to trading in hospitality. They've said that one of the things that they are looking at doing in many restaurants is securing the spend per head. And they're doing that by selling tickets. So we all know that getting customers to spend more is crucial to generating a profit in a restaurant. Actually, securing that up front is one way to make sure that you hit that. So you can't come in unless you've bought a £50 seat, and for which you will get X, Y, Z. And it means that variability is kind of taken out of the equation, and you don't end up losing one of your precious slots for somebody that actually only fancies a starter. And anecdotally, I think the appetite really is there for people to take up some of those slots, because certainly the restaurants that I look after have been seeing inquiries coming in left, right, and centre from their loyal following, asking for some of the first spaces that are available when they're back up and running, which is obviously hugely encouraging and testament to the quality of the food and experience on offer. So selling tickets is pretty good. I'd encourage businesses to be looking more widely at what other countries are doing as they're reopening, whether that be focused on the health and safety aspects of reopening, whether it be on the idea that you're generating profit, and really understanding that. I suppose beyond that, there's two other things that I think that you should be thinking about. I think that you should be making sure that you are capturing those that are keen to come back to you. So building and developing that relationship between you and your kind of loyal following, so that you know that they will be in the door within the first 2, 3, 4 weeks and following months, and continuing that relationship, because it's quite easy, as we've been sort of shut down and different restaurants are kind of taken different tacks, to almost have parked some of that. I'd be opening up those communication channels, and that communication point, and this is my kind of second and final point, it is really important in terms of working with the supply chain. We know that food distributors, wholesalers, those working in food service are having a tough time. And there's been mixed stories around people that have kind of made a success and have innovated to get where they can. But a recent survey's come out and said that if things continue to the end of the year, then over 50% of wholesalers, distributors believe that they are likely to need to cease to trade, or are at high risk of ceasing to trade. And they will be crucial in opening back up your business. So get in contact with them, because my take on that is that there are deals to be done which could help mutually help both parties, whether that's setting out your plans, what your likely requirements are going to be, whether it's negotiating a bit of a kind of price for a certain loyalty, or whatever it is. It's getting those channels open and having that conversation now, because you know that you are going to want to be relying on that food supply chain.
Yeah, I
Thanks,
think that's a really interesting point, Phil, about the food supply chain. Certainly that's my experience talking to the wholesale clients that I deal with, that obviously with food service having been shut down, those who are wholly 90% reliant on it, have had unbelievable challenges. Some others have been luckier because they've also supplied into the retail food sector, and therefore that obviously has pushed up the supermarkets, certainly in the initial weeks, struggling to support buyers. And the other option, of course, has been home delivery, that quite a lot of them have looked at doing, or feeding into home delivery producers. And I think the increase in home deliveries, I believe, has gone from sort of just under 5 million to just under 8 million in this period, which is a sort of unprecedented increase. So therefore, the wholesalers are certainly around, as you say, and I do think it's important that people are contacting their wholesalers and starting that dialogue, so the wholesalers can get some sort of visibility on how their individual customers are looking to open up. And I certainly would echo your idea about looking overseas. I mean, clearly there are a number of other countries, not even as far away as in Australia, but who are coming out of lockdown earlier than us, and it's trying to map and let's be honest, borrow some ideas from them as to how that might work. And the other thought that I had linked to your ticket idea was actually in terms of engaging with your customers as well and starting that dialogue. And when you do open, a bit like the hairdresser, is actually booking the customer in for their next slot. Because if we're significantly reducing the amount of available seats, then clearly if demand is there, and I would have thought that the anecdotal evidence is right, that having been incarcerated in their homes for the last 3 months, 4 months, people will be desperate to get out and do something. And they, whilst going out and buying a new car might feel like quite a challenging purchase with the economic environments ahead of us, certainly going out and buying a meal and then maybe at the end of the meal being invited to book the next slot and buy the next ticket for a couple of weeks' time might be a way of starting to get some certainty into the income stream that normally, of course, restaurants and pubs don't have to any degree.
It's a really interesting point, and actually I hadn't thought it through, but if you were to take that through to its logical conclusion, in a subscription society, you could actually see a model where you said, okay, for perhaps a discount, here's a 12-month subscription that allows you to come in for a meal once a month. And what a nice gift would that be to somebody for their favourite local restaurant. And what a great way would it be to kind of voice and cement your support. So yeah, perhaps you can, perhaps there are schemes that could be worked up that provide even longer term security over that spend per head.
Yeah, I think, sorry, Andrew.
Sorry, John, I was just going to say, looking at other industries, if you can make a comparison looking at software, software as a service. I mean, quite often what they'll do is offer a steep discount from the monthly payment if you pay an annualized amount, which I think is interesting. I think also just in the chat as we've been talking, Bev from Eat Festivals has mentioned that the ticketing option for restaurants is great. Really like the Digbeth Dining Club, which I don't know, but the Digbeth Dining Club click and collect limited menu, pre-order, prepay, an option for multi-vendors in one location. So yeah, definitely something in this, I think. Sorry, Jolyon.
Yeah, no, I mean, I was going to use the exact same point about borrowing from other industries and not being afraid to innovate. I mean, I wasn't entirely surprised that Phil wasn't as familiar with rebooking at the hairdresser, because obviously he doesn't have as much hair as I do, so it doesn't grow quite as often. So I obviously have to rebook more often. But I think, yeah, innovation across industries has to be the way. And certainly it's interesting you say, yeah, Bev was just talking. I thought it was particularly unhelpful when one of the scientists the other day talked about how we couldn't be going out and eating street food anymore because the levels of hygiene had declined, which I thought was rather bizarre, because you can actually buy hand washing gel nowadays that enables you to clean your hands before you actually go and buy food from street vendors. So I thought it was a slightly odd suggestion that we couldn't be contemplating having some sort of takeaway food facility or facilities. And whilst one may not be able to pack as many in because of the queuing issues, again, a little bit of innovation around how people queue. I mean, the British are probably the greatest queuers in the world. So, you know, it just comes back to, you know, yet more examples of just thinking laterally and if necessary, borrowing from other industries as to how we might enable the customers to get the experience that they're clearly going to be looking for. Because whilst I think many of the food delivery options have got people cooking from home in the way that they haven't before, which is great. And even my own son's following menus now, much to his girlfriend's delight. I do think that people are going to be very keen to get out there.
Well, I your comment about the British and queuing and the MP's experience in Westminster yesterday. Kind of quite amusing watching them work out their social distancing as they went through the lobby vote. Moving tack slightly and staying with you, Jolyon, we've been talking about the cash flow cycle for a few weeks now, but I think it's worth examining this in context of the food and drink sector so that businesses get clarity on this and are fully prepared for any cash flow challenges that lie ahead over the coming months.
Yeah, no, it is a good point, Andrew, and it's a point that, as you know, I've been quite concerned about, whereby the cash flow cycle, effectively the buffers that we all rely on have been and are getting eaten up by the losses that many businesses are currently incurring. And as we return to more positive times and we start to sell again, then of course for many people in the supply chain, that produces significant cash flow tightening as the working capital needs are re-established. The wholesalers being a good example, supplying, they've got to pay for the goods and then they've got to supply them on and wait to be paid. And if one's cash flow buffers have been exhausted by having to support the business through these times of lockdown, then I would very much encourage people to be making sure that they've got access to sufficient support, government-based support with the bounce back scheme and the Sybil scheme to ensure that as the cash flow requirements tighten up, as, dare I say it, positively turnover increases, then they're okay. And they've got lots of reserves to call on or loans to call on.
It's a source of some concern, Tony, because you mentioned the bounce back loan there, that actually some of the innovation that people have undertaken, some of the new ideas, the new routes to market, the new things that have been tried, their success or otherwise, as the case may be, may have been masked by a significant influx of cash, i.e. I've had a grant land of some description, I've not paid any rates, I've not had to deal with my VAT, and I've also got a 50k bounce back loan, and therefore actually I'm convinced, because I look at what's happening in cash terms, and that's how I'm used to running my business, that actually I'm making a success of this new operating model. And it is a concern of mine that may not be the case, that those support mechanisms have effectively masked what is a loss-making model that has been executed. And that might be okay if you're going into that with both eyes open, and you have a strategy of expanding your marketing reach or opening up new channels. But I guess you've got to know, as you say, that coming out the other side, you can actually gear up the way that you want to, and you're very clear about that. And so understanding exactly what that looks like and being on top of your numbers, therefore, it is going to be crucial.
Yeah, this is not a time for flying by the seat of your pants, as you say, Phil. You really got to understand all of the numbers that feed into the business, because you can run out of cash very quickly, even with a full order book.
Just kind of on that point, I mean, we've alluded to that fact that yes, it's challenging out there, but it's not all gloom and doom. There are businesses that have been able to pivot and adapt and open up new distribution channels or markets that perhaps they weren't in prior to COVID-19. So I guess on that kind of marketing side and kind of lifetime customer value and all that, I mean, really the question is around sort of how do these kind of businesses retain that business that they've built up during lockdown? What do they need to be doing to kind of retain that side of things?
Yeah, and I mean, you're right, Andrew. It's not all doom and gloom, and we've seen some absolutely wonderful stories of people that have actually opened up new distribution channels, and the trick will, of course, be to cement those into the future. And very consciously, one of my clients who provides a seasonal good at best, and sells most of his time through the year at markets, has obviously had that channel shut down. He's taken the decision that he wasn't going to furlough his staff, and very bravely has invested a significant sum, many thousands, in a Facebook marketing campaign. And he is very clear that what he has done, it has been to break even on that. He's paid the chaps that he's got working for him, so they're in a great place. And he's covered his costs and maybe turned a small profit, but it's opened up a huge new retail channel for him that he'd long been keen to explore and didn't feel that he had the opportunity to do so in the past. So that's a great success story. And I suppose we've had an unprecedented amount of shifting in terms of consumer behavior. People have been forced into looking at different products in a way that they wouldn't normally. Their brand loyalty has necessarily been eroded, and it's therefore a case of rebuilding a new brand loyalty. In the case of my friend, and making sure that some of those retail channels continue to stay open. What do I think you need to do? Well, actually, peculiarly, and perhaps unsurprisingly, it's not different to what I thought you needed to do before. He's now opened up that channel. He's got to deliver. The service has absolutely got to be there. And people are increasingly used to quick turnaround times in their delivery, increasingly used to getting exactly what they want, and that will yield repeat custom. I think that you've got to have your story right. So why is somebody buying from you? If you've got a farm to fork story, make sure everybody knows about it, because it's no good having that story if that's the best kept secret. This is perhaps just my opinion, but your product is important, but believe it or not, I just don't think it's the be all and end all. It's got to be good, but it's a bit like a kind of hygiene factor. People expect that your product is good. So I think you've got to be focused on your service and your story and making sure that you are communicating those things, because I think that is what will be locking in some of those new avenues that you may have been able to exploit.
Yeah, I think you're bang on with the experience point, Phil. I think it's absolutely what people are going to experience, and if they're getting experiences that they enjoy. I mean, it doesn't. It's interesting. There's been talk about the new normal, and there clearly will be a new normal. And there's been talk about completely changed patterns. And clearly, the situation of home delivery to the doorstep is such an example. But the reality is, when people were allowed to go down to the beach, and when people are allowed to go and queue outside IKEA, they did so in their droves again. So there are absolutely positive suggestions out there that people will be returning to do what they want to do and like doing. And people have enjoyed eating out, and the reality being positive about it is, whilst there will be losers in a recession, there are also always winners in a recession. So if one is more restricted as to the availability of supply, then the reality is there should still be a decent number of customers, and they will be looking for a good experience, which I think is your point.
Yeah, quite.
Just kind of having a think about going off in a different direction. We were talking the other day, Jolyon, about the importance of leadership and a motivated workshop as we kind of come out of this initial lockdown phase. Have you got any thoughts around that?
Yeah, motivated workforce. No, I mean, it's interesting. I was talking to a client the other day they've had to furlough about a third of their staff because they're running at lower production levels. And it's really interesting that what's happened is he has spent a lot of time with the team on in the production facility, and really trying to enhance the experience that his own team is getting. And he said they've got a terrific sense of togetherness and loyalty. Now, I could contrast that with another client who was telling me that one of their young employees had signed herself off with 2 weeks sick, saying that she was suffering from stress, which rather perplexed the said client, because as often with smaller businesses, HR is something that one learns on the job. It was a new concept of self-certification for 2 weeks due to stress. So clearly that was not somebody who was looking to support the business, albeit it may genuinely have been an awful, stressful situation. But it's spending the extra time with the individuals in the business, so they feel incredibly valued, and then hopefully building that relationship that becomes both ways, that people get a real sense of needing to support the business through the difficult times. So I think leadership will be essential, and really good leaders who really engage with their teams and really get a sense of togetherness are absolutely going to be critical and crucial through the phase. And I suppose, dare I say it as well, therefore, making sure that on the team you've got people who are genuinely committed to helping the business.
And Jolyon, I mean, my sense is that there will be businesses out there that have, they've been through a kind of furlough process. They've had to cut costs, and the support has been most welcome, of course. And in the rush to work out what was going on, to kind of find your way, and to, I suppose, prioritize survival, I think it's probably fair to say that not all businesses will necessarily have handled that process in the way that they would have wished that they had, and after a period of reflection may now be kind of thinking, well, I wish we'd kind of done something better. I mean, my take on that is that it's not too late, and actually picking up the phone and communicating, working with your workforce, and kind of sharing some of those thoughts, about the fact that we've got to kind of do it together as a business, is as critical now as it was at the start. I don't know whether you've got a kind of any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the key is engagement and actually listening, because in any team you have a series of individuals, and those individuals will all have personal challenges, personal needs. They will have challenges at home, as well, through this, and they will also be challenged by the whole situation in different ways. So certainly the engagement level, where leaders are personally engaging with their colleagues, with their team members, and really understanding the challenges that those individuals face, both in the business and outside the business. And then, instead of using a one-size-fits-all leadership style, actually really trying to engage with those individuals. And I think that's where you're going to get the loyalty to the business and the leadership. And I agree with you, again, even if you've made mistakes, and we've all made them, hence I've got white hair, not the nice brown hair that you've got. But you just got to put your hand up if you got it wrong, and you got to be honest and accept that we're not all perfect, and it's been a very difficult and challenging period, and mistakes have been made. But I do think, coming back to your point, Andrew, I think that businesses will be hugely reliant on fantastic teams working for them, and as ever, those, if we talk about client experience, customer experience, that is a lot driven by the individuals in the team. So whether you're a food producer or you're front of house, the quality of what you're doing, the engagement that you're then having with your customers is massively influenced by the team that is around you.
Mhm.
No, I agree. Just on that furlough process, I guess, and just to be really topical, I mean, we had Rishi Sunak's announcement at the end of last week that the coronavirus furlough scheme will finish at the end of October. Is it worth just running through some of the issues that will face business owners as they try to adapt to this phasing out of government support on wages?
Yeah, sure. I mean, look, I suppose there's reasonably well publicised information around what is going to happen with the furlough scheme, and I guess critically, we've avoided this so-called cliff edge that we fall off, and a complete withdrawal of support. So in the first instance, national insurance and pension contributions will start to become the employer's problem again, and there is going to be the opportunity for a return to part-time work, which I think is hugely welcome, because it provides much needed flexibility in a situation where businesses are seeking to recover and get back up to speed. As we know, I think that then the support is kind of cut away with greater input from the employer in terms of picking up the tab. And I don't want to dwell too much on the detail. I suppose what I would encourage businesses to be doing is to be understanding how they might be operating, what staff they could be playing into what roles in this period, and then understanding and really working through the maths of what it is that they think they are going to get. So what sort of profit is that going to generate for them? And once I've got the government support in, and recognising that I'm going to pay tax on that at the end, and all of those kind of different calculations, and they're not simple, does it make sense to operate in the way that I'm operating? So I think it's hugely welcome that the Chancellor set out some clarity. I think it's great that the scheme has been extended. It is understandable that there is a withdrawal of some of the support, but the point remains that you've got to get on top of what it means for you and for the operation of your business. It is no good opening up in a way that then doesn't deliver some sort of profit at the end.
Yeah, absolutely. This cannot be a hit and hope scenario. This has to be a well thought through reopening plan, which takes into account what the next few months will look like and where the increased costs will come in. Yeah, absolutely, Phil. So there has to be some scenario planning done to show that the businesses can operate in the new environment with the unwinding process. And it's not easy, but it's not impossible. And people say to me, well, if I don't know what's going to happen in the future, what on earth is the point in trying to predict it? And the answer is, well, you do various scenarios. And if scenario 1 happens, then you follow that track. And if scenario 2 happens, then you follow that track. And that's what certainly we've been doing with many clients is, you basically run the various scenarios. Am I going to get a 50% turnover? Am I going to get a 10% turnover, as I've got a couple of clients? Can I survive at 40%? And if so, what do I need to do? And I think the food and drink sector is no different. And everybody thinks it's been okay, but it's been a very mixed picture, as we've said, albeit clearly the mood music come out of the government suggests that opportunities are going to be there in July and August and beyond.
For viewers who might want to have a look at the detail, we did actually upload a detailed article onto the website at the beginning of the week, so there is some sort of background there for people who want to have a look at that. I'm just conscious of the time. We've kind of run to about 35 minutes now. Any final thoughts from both of you before we wrap up this morning?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that has always marked out British success, if you like, is our innovation. We always look at problems laterally and come up with good ideas, and to support that is our flexibility. We are a natural business, small business island And I think, positively, some of the stories that we're seeing, and obviously Phil's quoted one or two that I've seen of people switching the way they run their businesses, switching the way they approach problems. I am confident that if anybody can do it, then then we can, albeit I accept it's going to be very challenging.
Yeah, I think a few weeks ago when the Prime Minister stood up and announced that if you couldn't work from home, then you should go to work and you should start that tomorrow. And there was a whole hoo-ha about how well that had been planned and delivered, and how realistic was it to go and send people off on Monday morning when he was talking to the nation on Sunday night. And there was a bit of an internal debate in my family. And the WhatsApp was sort of going off the radar, and I sort of strongly held the view that lots of people had several weeks, a couple of months even, to be thinking about what their return to work might and should look like. And I was surprised that it seemed to have caught people off guard. Now, if I reflect, that's probably a little black and white, and of course, actually, guidance around what a return looks like is obviously pretty helpful. I think that if you take Jolyon's point, we've got some time. There has been some time to think about what we should be doing. Let's make sure that we've utilised that time. And if we've got innovations, if we've got changes to make, if we need to adapt, let's be absolutely ready, because we don't know exactly when we get to go. But we don't want to be sat there on Sunday night with everybody else doing something on Monday morning when we could have been at the races as well. So that's my thought.
Okay, thanks, Phil. Although I said we were just about to wrap up, a quick question that's come into the chat as you were talking. So whether we can just have a quick look at this one before we close off. So any other tips, workarounds that you've seen from food and drink businesses, VAT schemes, funding, etc.? Anything spring to mind?
Nothing for VAT. I think that the one thing I'd say about funding is there is a unique opportunity with the bounce back loan to make changes that perhaps you'd been kind of dreaming about and you hadn't quite worked out how to finance, and you hadn't been able to secure the answer that you wanted. There is a source of funding available that is virtually a slam dunk in terms of its availability, and it is cheap money. That doesn't mean that you should go out and recklessly kind of burn through your 50 grand. But if there is an opportunity that you've been mulling over, it is a change to your patio area that means that you can open your restaurant up to 20 new diners for 4 months of the year, that you've got a piece of kit that will pay back over the next 3 years. And so actually it kind of aligns with where the funding's at. Then be evaluating that, and therefore be brave. That's I think what I would be doing.
Thanks, Phil. Okay then, I think that brings us to the end of this session this morning. I'd like to thank our live viewers for your participation, your questions. A big thank you to our two panelists for your insights. I think the kind of fireside chat concept works well for me. We will be returning on, I think, Thursday, the 18th of June is the next session. The theme is going to be around planning opportunities, and obviously to continue the conversation and answer more of your questions. So in the meantime, thank you everybody for patching in. Goodbye and stay safe.